She came as a hostage. This was the arrangement, and she understood it perfectly. Her kingdom had lost the war. Her father had signed the treaty. One of its terms was her. Princess Lena of the South, delivered to the northern fortress of Alpha Can Ashford as a guarantee of her kingdom's compliance. Not a prisoner, a hostage. There was a difference, and the difference was that a hostage had to be treated well enough to remain useful. She had prepared for this the way she prepared for everything, with complete, clear-eyed honesty about what she was walking into, and a decision made in advance about how she was going to survive it. She would be civil. She would be correct. She would give him nothing of herself beyond the minimum required by the treaty terms, and she would spend every day looking for the shape of the future that got her home. She had not prepared for Sera. Sera was 2 years old and had her father's dark coloring and her dead mother's gray eyes and an expression of such absolute certainty about the world that Lena had found it briefly alarming before she understood that the certainty was being directed at her specifically. The child had looked at Lena on the first morning, across the length of the great hall, with those gray eyes that belonged to someone else's portrait. And she had walked across the room, and she had held up her arms. Lena had looked at her. She had looked at the child's raised arms. She had looked at Cain, who was standing very still at the far end of the hall with an expression she could not read. She had looked back at the child. She had picked her up. She had not been prepared for what that felt like. She had not been prepared for any of it. My name is Sansa. Welcome to Sansa Romance Oracle. This is the story of a woman who came as an enemy and stayed as something else entirely. A man who loved his dead wife and could not stop and did not know what to do with a woman who made him want to try. And the 2-year-old girl who decided, with the absolute authority of someone who has never doubted her own judgment, that this was her mother. Now everyone just had to catch up. Prologue, the terms of her arrival. The treaty had taken 11 days to negotiate. Lena had not been present for any of it. She had been in the southern palace, in her rooms, preparing. Her ladies had helped her pack what she was allowed to bring, which was not much. Her father had come the evening before she left. He had sat in the chair by her window and looked at his hands for a long time. He had said, "You do not have to agree to this." She had said, "Yes, I do." He had said, "Lena." She had said, "Papa. If I refuse, the treaty fails. If the treaty fails, we go back to war. We cannot go back to war." She had kept her voice even. "We cannot survive another year of it." Her father had looked at his hands. He had said, "He is not a cruel man. From everything I know of him." She had said, "I know." He had said, "His mate died 18 months ago." "He is." She had said, "I know, Papa." He had stopped. She had finished packing. She had thought about the portrait she had seen in the treaty documents. Standard practice. Both parties exchanged formal representations of their household members as part of the diplomatic record. The Alpha of Ashford. Dark hair. Controlled expression, the look of a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had simply incorporated it into his posture. His mate, Mira. Alive in the portrait. Dark eyes, warm face. The kind of face that suggested she had been easy to love. His daughter, unnamed in the document. 18 months old at the time of recording. Lena had looked at the portrait of Mira for a long time. She had made a decision. She would not try to replace her. She would not try to be anything other than what the treaty required. She would be present, civil, and entirely self-contained. And she would not allow herself to feel anything about this man, or his child, or his grief, or his life, that was not strictly necessary. It was a good plan. She had been executing good plans her whole life. She arrived at the northern fortress on a cold morning in early winter, 3 horses in her escort, her single trunk of permitted belongings, and her very good plan intact. The great hall was warm. The Alpha stood at its far end, exactly as the portrait had suggested, controlled and carrying something. His daughter stood beside him, holding his hand. The daughter looked at Lena. Lena looked at the daughter. The daughter let go of her father's hand and began walking across the room. Lena's very good plan lasted approximately 30 more seconds. Chapter 1. What Sera decided. The child walked the length of the great hall with the focused purpose of someone who had thought about this and was now executing it. She was 2 years old. She came to approximately Lena's hip. She was wearing a dress that was slightly too large for her, which suggested someone had dressed her this morning in the closest available thing, rather than the ideal thing, which suggested the fortress's domestic arrangements were perhaps not entirely organized, which Lena filed away without judgment. She stopped in front of Lena. She looked up. She had gray eyes. They were not common in the north. They were her mother's eyes, which Lena knew because she had looked at the portrait for a long time and Mira had gray eyes. Looking into them now felt like looking at a face Lena had been told about before she met it. The child reached up her arms. Lena looked at the arms. She looked at the child's face. She looked across the room at Chane, who had not moved. His expression had shifted from controlled to something that was still controlled, but over a great deal more uncertainty than she had expected from a man with his reputation. She looked at the arms. She crouched. She picked the child up. The child settled against her with the immediate confidence of someone who had made a decision and was satisfied with the outcome. She put one hand flat on Lena's cheek. She examined Lena's face with considerable thoroughness. Then she said, "Not a question, a statement, Mama." The great hall was very quiet. Lena held very still. She said, "Carefully, I am not your mama, little one." The child considered this information. She patted Lena's cheek. She said it again. "Mama." Lena looked at Can. He looked back at her. His jaw was doing something tightly controlled. She understood, in that moment, that this was not what he had planned either. He had planned for a political arrangement. He had planned to manage it with the same controlled distance. He managed everything. He had not planned for his daughter to cross a great hall in under 40 seconds and rewrite the arrangement entirely. Lena understood, both currently in a situation neither of them had consented to. She was still holding the child. The child had put her head on Lena's shoulder. Lena looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then she looked at Kane. She said, "We should probably discuss the terms," he said. "Yes." He said it in the voice of a man who had just watched something happen that he had no framework for and was taking a moment to locate a new one. Lena carried the child to the table. Sera put her hand in Lena's hair and examined it with great interest. Lena sat down. She told herself this was manageable. She told herself a 2-year Old's attachment was a temporary thing, easily redirected with patience and consistency. She told herself she was here for the treaty and not for the gray-eyed child who smelled like wood smoke and something sweet. She told herself all of this very firmly. The child fell asleep on her shoulder before the tea arrived. Lena sat very still and did not move and looked at the wall. Chapter 2. The rules they made. They negotiated her presence the way they negotiated everything. Formally, with clarity about what each party required and what they were willing to provide. He was direct. She had expected this from the portrait, but the directness in person was different. It had no performance in it. He did not dress things up or strategize with his words. He simply said what he meant and waited to hear what she meant. She found this, after the courts she had grown up in, almost startling. The terms, he said. You are here as guarantee of the Southern Treaty. You are a guest of this household, not a prisoner. You have freedom of the fortress and its grounds. You will be treated with the courtesy appropriate to your rank, she said. And in exchange, he said, your presence here is the exchange. Nothing more is required of you. She said nothing. He said, nothing. She looked at him. She said, and the child. Something shifted in his expression. She had been watching him for the length of this conversation, and he was the kind of man who kept everything behind his face very successfully. But the child's mention reached past the control. She filed this away also, he said. Sera is not part of the terms, Lena said. She has made herself part of them. He said nothing. Lena said, I am not her mother. We should be clear about that. He said, I know that. She said, she will need to understand it eventually. He said, she is 2 years old. She said, yes. And she is already very certain about things. A pause. Then she is her mother's daughter in that regard. Lena looked at him. He had looked away. He was looking at the fire with the expression of a man who had said something he had not meant to say out loud. She made a decision. She said, tell me about her mother. He looked at her. You do not have to, she said. But if Sera is going to be around me, and I am going to be around her, then I should understand what I am stepping near, what I should not disturb, what I should protect. He was quiet for a long moment. He said, Mira was. He stopped. He said, she was the warmest person I have ever known. It was not something she performed. It was simply what she was. Rooms were different when she was in them. He looked at the fire. She died 18 months ago, he said. The birth was difficult. Sera was not the difficulty. Sera was healthy. Sera was fine. The difficulty was everything after. Lena said nothing. He said she held Sera once. She told me her name, and then she was gone. The fire made a small sound. He said, I tell you this because you should know, not because I want your sympathy. I have enough of my own. Lena said, I understand. He looked at her. She held his gaze. She said, my mother died when I was 4. Not the same circumstances. But I know what a room without that person feels like. He was quiet. She said, I am not here to replace her. I am here because a treaty required someone to be here. I want you to know that I understand the difference. He nodded. They looked at the fire. They had not become comfortable with each other. That would take longer than one evening. But they had become, in some way that Lena had not anticipated, honest. It was more than she had expected from this day. She went to bed that night and lay in the dark and thought about gray eyes and wood smoke, and the particular weight of a sleeping child on her shoulder. She told herself it was manageable. She was not as certain as she had been that morning. 2. Sera. The things Sera required. Sera had requirements. Lena discovered these over the first week with the gradual accumulation of a person mapping new terrain. Sera required presence at breakfast. Not food, necessarily. Though she was interested in food. Presence. The specific quality of having someone at the table who was focused on her. Her father provided this in the mornings, before his council obligations took him away. When he was gone, Sera looked at the door for a moment, then looked at Lena. Lena began arriving at breakfast. Sera required the reading of a specific book at an unspecified interval throughout the day. The book was about a rabbit and a forest, and had been read to Sera a number of times that had rendered it completely structurally unsound. She carried it with both hands and presented it to whoever was nearest with the expectation that the nearest person would understand what was being asked. The nearest person was often Lena. Lena read the book about the rabbit and the forest. She read it many times. She began to have opinions about the rabbit's decision-making. Sera required a specific position for sleeping. On her left side, facing the room, with a particular blanket that was gray and had a rabbit embroidered in the corner. The blanket had been made by Mira. Lena had been told this by Kane's housekeeper on the third day, delivered as information Lena should simply have. She had accepted it as such. She tucked the blanket carefully every night. She was not supposed to be doing this. She had a room of her own in the guest wing, and Sera had a nurse whose entire purpose was the management of Sera's evenings. But Sera had discovered, on the second night, that Lena's room was adjacent to the nursery and had simply appeared at the connecting door at bedtime and waited. Lena had looked at her. Sera had looked back. The nurse had looked between them with the expression of a woman who had seen this before and was waiting to see how the new arrival was going to handle it. Lena had picked her up and put her to bed. She was not supposed to be doing any of this. She was here for the treaty. On the fifth morning, she arrived at breakfast and found Can already there. He looked up when she came in. He looked at her in the way he had been looking at her, with the controlled attention that she had learned, meant he was paying more careful attention than his face suggested. He said, "She came to your door again last night." Lena sat down. She said, "Yes." He said, "I apologize. She should not be." Lena said, "She is 2 years old. She does what she decides to do." He said, "I can speak to the nurse. Have her redirected." Lena looked at him. She said, "Is that what you want?" He said nothing. She said, "Because she is not bothering me, if that is what you are concerned about." He looked at his tea. He said, "It is not only what I am concerned about." She waited. He said, "You are not." He stopped. He said, "I do not want her to." He stopped again. Lena understood what he was not saying. She said it for him. "You do not want her to love something she cannot keep," she said. He looked at her. She said, "I am here for the treaty. Eventually the treaty's terms will shift or end, and I will go home. She will not understand that." He nodded. His jaw was very tight. She said, "That is the real problem." He said yes. She looked at Sera, who was eating her porridge with the focused efficiency she brought to things she enjoyed. Sera had not been listening. She was 2 years old and the porridge was interesting. Lena said, quietly. She chose this. Not me, he said. I know, she said. I do not know how to undo a 2-year-old's choice, he said. Neither do I. They sat with this for a moment. Sera looked up and found Lena and smiled with the complete, wholehearted unself-consciousness of someone who has no doubt about the quality of their welcome. Lena felt it in her chest, like a hand closing around something. She looked at Chain. He was watching his daughter smile at the enemy princess. His face was doing the thing it did when the control was working too hard. She looked away. She was in significant trouble. She had been here 5 days. Chapter 4: The Portrait. The portrait was in the east corridor. Lena had been avoiding it since her arrival. Not overtly. She simply routed herself in ways that did not require her to walk past it. She had become very good at alternate routes. On the 9th day, Sera led her directly to it. Sera moved through the fortress with the confidence of someone who had personally mapped every corridor and knew exactly where everything was. She had Lena by one finger, which was her preferred method of navigation. She did not hold Lena's hand so much as claim one finger and use it to indicate direction. She turned into the east corridor. Lena recognized where they were going. She did not redirect. They stopped in front of the portrait. Mira, painted 2 years before she died. Dark eyes, warm face, the quality that Cain had tried to describe. Rooms were different when she was in them. The portrait held some of it. The painter had understood the subject. Sera looked up at it. She said the words she said for things she recognized. She had a small vocabulary, but used it with precision. She said, Mama. Then she looked at Lena. She said, Mama. She pointed at the portrait. She pointed at Lena. Then she tugged Lena's finger, her standard indication that further movement was required, and walked away down the corridor, as though this had been simply one point among many on the morning's agenda. Lena stood in the corridor. She looked at the portrait for a moment. She said, quietly, to no one, I am not going to take your place. The portrait looked back with dark eyes that had no opinion on the matter. She heard boots on the stone and turned. Cain was at the corridor's end. He had seen. She could not tell how long he had been there. She did not apologize. She said, She brought me here. I did not plan to. He said, I know. She does that. He was looking at the portrait, she said. She said her word for both of us. He said, I know. He was quiet. She does not have a word that distinguishes. Lena said, no. He looked at her. He said, does that? He stopped. She waited. He said, does it bother you? That she. He stopped again. That she does not seem to understand the distinction. Lena looked at the portrait. She said, honestly, it should bother me. And it does not. And I am not sure what to do with that. He was quiet. She looked at him. He was looking at her with the expression she had been cataloging since she arrived. The controlled one, over the great deal of uncertainty, over something else that she had not yet named, because naming it felt premature and possibly dangerous. She said, I am going to be honest with you about something. He said, all right. She said, I came here entirely prepared to be civil and correct and entirely unreachable. That was my plan. She paused. Your daughter has made that plan very difficult to execute. He said, nothing. She said, I want you to know that I am aware of it. I am not trying to replace her mother. I am not trying to install myself in a position I was not asked to fill. I am simply, she stopped. He said, quietly staying. She looked at him. He said, "You are simply staying." In the way she requires. Lena said nothing. He looked at the portrait. He said, "Mira would have." He stopped. "She would have liked you, I think." She had no patience for people who performed their feelings. "She would have found you." He stopped again. He said, "Honest." "She would have found you honest." Lena looked at him. He looked at the portrait. They stood in the east corridor in the cold morning light, and neither of them said anything else. But she did not take the alternate route again after that. Chapter 5. The Council's Opinion. The Council had opinions. They had been having them, Lena gathered, since approximately 3 days after her arrival. She heard them in the way she had always heard things. At the edges of conversations, in the careful pauses when she entered rooms, in the particular look that two people exchanged when they had been discussing something they did not want to discuss in front of her. She was the enemy princess. She understood their concern. She was spending a great deal of time with the Alpha's daughter. She understood their concern about this specifically. She was navigating it the way she navigated everything, by making herself useful in ways that had nothing to do with the child or the Alpha, and by being so consistently civil and competent that opposition required effort. She had helped with the winter supply negotiations. Her kingdom and kins shared a trade route, and she knew the southern pricing structures in a way that saved the fortress a significant amount. Over the winter months, she had noted 3 inefficiencies in the fortress's medical records and suggested corrections. She had spoken to the pack elder about the spring planting with information about southern soil management that he had found useful and had not been too proud to acknowledge. She was making herself useful. This was, she knew, a survival skill she had developed young. When you were not sure of your welcome, you made yourself difficult to remove. The council member who was most vocal about his concerns was a man called Arlo. Older. Had served under Cain's father. Had watched Mira die and had watched Cain carry it. Had, Lena suspected, decided that the enemy princess's growing influence in the household was a threat to something he had spent 18 months trying to stabilize. He came to her directly, which she respected. He said, "You have settled in comfortably." She said, "I have tried to be useful," he said. "The child." She waited. He said, "She is not yours to attach to," Lena said. With respect, "She attached to me." "I did not seek it," he said, "and you have done nothing to discourage it." She said, "She is 2 years old," he said. "She is the heir of this territory and her welfare is a matter of." Lena said, "I am aware." She kept her voice even. "I am aware of every implication of the situation I am in. I did not choose it. The child chose it. I am here for the treaty, and I am managing the situation as carefully as I am able." He said, "Leave her alone." He said it without heat, just fact. Lena looked at him. She said, "When she comes to my door at bedtime, what would you have me do?" "Close it." He was quiet. She said, "I am not her mother. I know that. She does not know it yet. The way to help her understand it is not to close a door in the face of a 2-year-old who has not yet developed the category for why that door should be closed." He said, "You will leave eventually." She said, "I know that." He said, "And she will not understand it." She said, "I know that too." He looked at her. She looked back. She said, "I am doing the best I can with a situation nobody planned for, including her father. Arlo was quiet. He said, "He is watching you." She said nothing. He said, more quietly, "I have served him for 11 years. I watched him with Mira. I watched him after. He does not look at people the way he looks at you. He has not looked at anyone that way since." Lena said nothing. He said, "I am not telling you this as encouragement. I am telling you because you should know what you are navigating." She said, "I appreciate the honesty," he said. "Do not hurt them." "Either of them," she said. "That is not my intention." He looked at her for a long moment. He said, "No, I do not think it is." He left. Lena sat with what he had said for a long time. "He is watching you." She had known this. She had been cataloging it for weeks. The specific quality of Cain's attention. The way he was present in rooms in a different way when she was also present. The conversations that lasted longer than the topic required. She had been telling herself it was the treaty, the practical necessity of understanding someone you were obligated to coexist with. She sat in the corridor and told herself this was still true. She was less persuasive than she had been. Chapter 6. What he could not stop noticing. He had a list. He had not made it intentionally. It had assembled itself over weeks. In the way things assembled when you were paying attention to something despite a decision not to. The way she read the rabbit book. She had begun adding commentary, not changing the text. She would never change the text. He had noticed that she was meticulous about the things that mattered to Sera, and the rabbit book mattered to Sera. But between pages, quietly, she added observations. "The rabbit's decision here is questionable," she would say. Sera would look at her with gray eyes and complete agreement. The way she had handled Arlo. He had watched the conversation from the corridor. He had not meant to listen. She had been composed and direct, and she had not apologized for the situation she was in, and she had not been unkind about it either. She had simply been honest. He had always been able to tell the difference between performance and honesty, and everything about her was the second thing. The way she stood in the east corridor. He had come around the corner and found her looking at the portrait, and he had heard what she said. "I am not going to take your place," said to a painting, said to Mira. Without drama or self-consciousness, simply as a statement of intent that she had apparently needed to make aloud. He had thought about that for a long time. He had a list, and he had been trying not to look at it, and it was not working. Mira had been gone 18 months. He had spent those 18 months in the particular suspension of a man who had loved deeply and lost completely, and had simply not known how to locate the beginning of a different life. He had functioned. He had run the territory. He had loved his daughter with the specific ferocity of a man who had one thing left and knew it. He had simply not moved. And then a treaty had sent him a woman he had not asked for. He had resented the treaty. He had managed it. He had assumed he would continue managing it until its terms shifted and she went home, and the fortress went back to what it had been. The fortress had not gone back to what it had been. The fortress had become something different, not better. Different was not better. Different was simply what it was. There was someone at breakfast who argued about the rabbit's choices. There was someone in the east corridor who talked to his dead wife's portrait with the same directness she brought to everything. There was someone who tucked his daughter in at night and did not require anything in return. He found her in the library on a Sunday evening. She was reading something that was not the rabbit book, which was a genuine concern, because he had begun to fear she had been reading nothing else for 3 weeks. He sat across from her. She looked up. He said, "She asked me today where you were." She waited. He said, "She has a new word. She has been using it for you." Lena said, "What word?" He said, "Mine." The library was quiet. She said, "Carefully, she says that for things she likes." He said, "Yes." He looked at his hands. "She says it for the rabbit book, for the gray blanket, for the pine trees in the courtyard." He looked at her. He said, "For you." She was very still. He said, "I am not telling you this to pressure you into something. I am telling you because you said you wanted honesty about what we were navigating." She said, "I know." He said, "She has started saying it when she wakes up, before she says anything else. Mine." Lena looked at her book. She said, "That is." She stopped. He waited. She said, "That is a very difficult thing to hear." He said, "Yes." She said, "Because it makes it harder." He said, "Harder to what?" She looked up. She said, "Harder to remember that I am here for the treaty." He looked at her. She looked back. The library was very quiet. He said, "Is that the only reason you are still finding it difficult?" She said nothing. He said, "Because the treaty has been satisfied for 6 weeks. You have fulfilled the residential requirement. You could have requested a review of terms at any point." She said, "Nothing." He said, quietly, "You have not requested it." She looked at her hands. She said, "No." He said, "Why?" She looked up. She said, "Because Sera says mine when she wakes up, and I do not know how to walk away from that." He said, "That is one reason." She held his gaze. She said, "Yes." He said, "Is there another?" She looked at him for a long time. At the man who had told her about Mira with the particular honesty of someone who did not dress things up, who had let her walk past the portrait, who had been watching her for weeks with the attention she had been pretending not to notice. She said, "You know there is another." He said, "I need to hear it." She said, "Can?" He said, "Please." She breathed. She said, "I came here to survive an arrangement I did not choose." She paused. "I am no longer surviving it. I am." She stopped. He waited. She said, "I am living in it. I am living here, and I have been pretending that is a temporary condition, and I have run out of ways to pretend that." He said nothing. She said, "Your daughter calls me mine, and I feel it. I feel it the way she means it." He said, quietly, "And her father?" She looked at him. She said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, "Her father looks at me like I am not temporary." He said, "You are not temporary." She said, "I am an enemy princess." He said, "You are the woman my daughter chose, and the woman I." He stopped. He said, "I have been not moving for 18 months. I have been standing in one place because moving felt like leaving something behind. And then you arrived, and you stood in the east corridor and talked to her portrait, and you said, you were not going to take her place, and I." He stopped. He said, "You are not taking her place. There is no place to take. There is only." He reached across the table. He put his hand over hers. He said, "There is only what is here now, and what is here now is you." She looked at his hand on hers. She looked at him. She said, "I did not come here to love your daughter." He said, "I know." She said, "I did not come here to." He said, "I know." She turned her hand over. His fingers closed around hers. She said, "I did not plan any of this." He said, "Neither did I." She looked at him. Softly, she said, "Mine again this morning." He said, "She was talking about you." She said, "I know." He said, quietly, "So was I." The library was warm, and outside the fortress the snow had started, and Sera was asleep in the next wing with her gray blanket and her rabbit book. And somewhere in the east corridor, the portrait looked out at a room that was beginning, slowly and without ceremony, to become something different. Not what it was before. Something new. Something that had not been planned by anyone except a 2-year-old with gray eyes who had walked across a great hall and put her arms up and decided. She was always right, that child. She always had been. Chapter 7, the morning after. She had not meant to fall asleep in the library. She woke to gray morning light and a fire that someone had banked through the night, and Kane in the chair across from her, awake, looking at something in the middle distance with the expression he wore when he was working through a problem that had no clean solution. She sat up. He looked at her. She said, "I did not mean to." He said, "I know. I did not wake you." She looked at the banked fire. She said, "You stayed." He said, "You were asleep and I did not want to leave." She looked at him. He said it plainly, the way he said everything, without performance. "Just fact." She said, "Kane." He said, "Yes." She said, "What are we doing?" He was quiet. She said, "I need to understand what we are doing because there is a child involved, and I cannot be careless with that." He said, "I know." She said, "She calls me hers." And she stopped. "I cannot be a thing that leaves, not for her. If I am going to be here, I have to be here fully. And if I am not going to be here, then I should leave now, before she is old enough to know the difference." He said, "I know that." She said, "So I need to know what this is." He looked at his hands. He said, "I want you to stay." He said it without hesitation. "That is what this is. I want you to stay, and I want Sera to have what she has decided she wants, and I want." He stopped. He looked at her. He said, "I want to see if what is here can grow into something. I do not know if it can. I know that I have not wanted to find out if something could grow into something for 18 months, and I want to find out now." She said, "That is honest." He said, "I can only be honest. I do not know another way." She said, "I know." She breathed. "I can only be honest either. That is probably why we have ended up here." He said, "In a library at dawn." She said, "In a library at dawn." A sound from the upper corridor. Small feet. The particular rhythm of a 2-year-old who had woken and found herself alone and was in the process of rectifying this. They both heard it. Lena stood. She looked at him. She said, "If I go to her now, I am not going back." He said, "I know." She said, She stopped. I am not leaving. I am staying. If I go to her now, that is what it means." He stood. He said, "I know what it means." She looked at him. He looked at her. She said, "Then I am going to her." He said, "Yes." She went. He heard Sera's voice in the corridor, the small, bright certainty of it. And then he heard Lena's voice, lower and warm, saying something he could not make out. And then he heard Sera make the sound she made when she was entirely satisfied with how things were going. He stood in the library in the gray morning light. Outside the window, the snow was still coming down. He thought about the portrait in the east corridor. He thought about Mira, who had been the warmest person he had ever known, and about the fact that he had been standing still for 18 months, because moving had felt like leaving. He understood, standing in the library, that she would not have wanted that. She had been warm, and she had loved him, and she would have looked at this situation with those dark eyes, and she would have said go. He thought about a 2-year-old who had walked across a great hall and known immediately. Sera was her mother's daughter. She always had been. He went to find them. Chapter 8. What Sera understood more than people thought she did. This was not unusual for children. Adults consistently underestimated the processing capacity of very small people, particularly very small people who were listening carefully to everything. Sera listened carefully to everything. She knew that the portrait in the east corridor was her mother. She had known this for as long as she had the word. She did not fully understand what that meant yet. She did not have the concept of death in the way an older child would have it. But she understood absence. She understood that the person in the portrait was someone her father loved, and who was not here. She also understood that Lena was here. She understood this in a very direct and physical way. Lena was the arms that lifted her, and the voice that read the rabbit, and the warmth that was there in the morning, and there at bedtime, and there when she woke up in the night, and was uncertain about the dark. She did not have a word for what Lena was. That was different from the word she had for the portrait. She used the same word because it was the closest word she had. She was 2 years old. Her vocabulary was limited. Her understanding was not. One morning, she took Lena to the east corridor. She did this deliberately. She had thought about it, in the way she thought about things. Not in language, but in the felt sense of things that needed to happen. She stopped in front of the portrait. She put one hand on Lena's leg. She looked at the portrait. She said her word for it. Then she looked at Lena. She said her word for Lena. Then she did something she had not done before. She reached up and took Lena's hand. And she reached up with the other hand and put it flat on the wall beside the portrait. She looked between Lena, with her 2-year-old face completely serious. She said, "Mine." Then she said it again, looking at Lena. "Mine." She tugged Lena's hand. She walked back down the corridor. She had said what she needed to say. Lena stood in the corridor for a moment after. She had understood what Sera was telling her. Not in words. Sera did not have the words. But in the gesture, the hand on the wall beside the portrait, the look between them. She was not replacing. She was being added. Sera had made the distinction that Lena had been trying to make since she arrived, and she had made it with one hand on a wall and a 2-year-old certainty. She was not her mother. She was also not nothing. She was Sera's. And Sera had decided this was a large enough category to hold more than one. Lena walked back down the corridor. She found Tane at the corridor's end. He had heard. She looked at him. He said, "She has always been very clear about what she wants." Lena said, "She is her father's daughter too." He looked at her. She said, "Clear. Direct. Will not be argued with." The corner of his mouth did something very small. She said, "I need you to know that I am not afraid of the portrait. I am not afraid of Mira. I am not asking you to put her away or pretend she was not here or love her less." He said, "I know." She said, "I am asking to be." She stopped. She said, "I am asking to be added." The way Sera said. He said, "Yes." She said, "That is all." He said, "That is not a small thing." She said, "No, but it is an honest one." He looked at her. He said, "It is everything." He reached out. He tucked a strand of hair back from her face. She looked at him. He said, "Stay." She said, "I already told you I was staying." He said, "I know. I want to say it out loud." "Stay. Please stay." She said, "Yes." He kissed her, not like a man who was replacing something, like a man who had been standing still and had finally taken a step. She kissed him back. Down the corridor, Sera was in the great hall, arranging her collection of stones in a pattern that made sense to her. She looked up at the ceiling. She looked back at her stones. She had known how this was going to go. She always did. 2. Chapter 9. What the South sent. The letter came on a Thursday. It was from her father. Formal, careful, diplomatic. It informed her that the treaty's review period had arrived and that if she wished to invoke her right of return, she should do so within the month. Lena read it at the kitchen table. Chain was across from her. He watched her read it. He did not ask what it said. He could see enough from her face. She folded it. She looked at him. She said, "The treaty review." He said, "I know." She said, "I have the right to return." He said, "I know." He kept his voice even, carefully even. She looked at the letter. She said, "If I invoke the right of return, the treaty is considered satisfied. My father gets his agreement honored. I go home." He said, "Yes," she said. "And if I do not invoke it," he said, "then you stay. On different terms. Terms we would negotiate ourselves." She said, "What terms?" He said, "The terms you want." She looked at him. He said, "Whatever you need. Whatever keeps you here on terms that are yours and not a treaty's." "Name them." She said, "Chain." He said, "Name them." She said, "I would need my father to accept it. He would need to understand that I am not here because a document requires it." He said, "I will write to him." "If you want." She said, "What would you write?" He was quiet for a moment. He said, "I would write that his daughter came here as a guarantee and became something else entirely, and that I would like his blessing to make that something else formal." He paused. "And that the terms he gets in return are better than the treaty offered, because they are negotiated between people who have decided to be on the same side." She looked at him. She said, "That is." She stopped. She said, "That is a good letter." He said, "I have had time to think about it." She said, "How much time?" He said, "Approximately 6 weeks." She looked at the folded letter from her father. She thought about her plan, the good plan she had arrived with, the civil and correct and entirely unreachable plan. She thought about a 2-year-old putting her hand on a wall beside a portrait. She thought about the library and the banked fire and a man who had stayed because he did not want to leave. She said, "Write the letter." He said, "Yes," she said, "and I will write my own." He looked at her. She said, "He is my father. I should be the one to tell him." He said, "What will you tell him?" She looked at the table. She looked at her hands. She looked at the man across from her, who tended his pine trees and read the rabbit book when she was busy and had not moved for 18 months and had taken one very deliberate step in the library at dawn. She said, "I will tell him I am staying. Not because I was sent, because I chose it." He said nothing. She said, "I will tell him about Sera." He was still. She said, "Because he should know. He should know that I am not here out of obligation or loneliness, or because I ran out of options." She paused. "I am here because a Year-old walked across a room and put her arms up, and I have not recovered from it, and I do not intend to. His jaw was very tight. She said, and I will tell him about you. He said, what about me? She said, that you are honest, and that you tend trees, and that you stayed in the library because you did not want to leave. He looked at her. She looked back. She said, those are the important things. He said, yes. She reached across the table. She put her hand over his. He looked at their hands. He said, we are doing this. She said, we are doing this. He turned his hand over. His fingers closed around hers. Down the corridor, Sera was awake from her nap, and her voice was the particular voice of a child who had found something interesting and was coming to tell someone about it. And the interest stone from the courtyard, that was a very good shape, and she wanted to show both of them, and she put one in each of their free hands and looked between them with gray eyes, and between them with a grayly, with the style of weary faction. They looked at the stones. They looked at each other. Cain said, it is a good shape. Lena said, very good shape. Sera said, mine. She meant all of it. She always did. Chapter 10. What she chose. She wrote the letter that evening. She had done many things in her life that required courage. Walking into this fortress had been one of them. Negotiating the supply contracts. Standing in front of Arlo and being honest. Walking into the library and saying what she meant. Writing to her father was different. Her father had sent her here to save her kingdom. He had sat in the chair by her window and looked at his hands and said, you do not have to. And she had said, yes, I do. He had carried the weight of sending her, and she had carried the weight of being sent, and neither of them had spoken of it directly, because there were things that were too large to survive direct examination. She wrote to him anyway. She wrote to Papa, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it in the spirit it is intended. She wrote about Sera. She described her with honesty. The gray eyes, the rabbit book, the word she used for things she claimed. She described the corridor and the portrait and the small hand on the wall. She wrote, I did not come here to become someone's mother. I came here to survive an arrangement. I want you to know that I am not surviving it anymore. I am living in it. There is a difference. The difference is that I wake up in the morning and she is there and she says her word for me, and I feel it the way she means it. She wrote, I am not replacing her mother. I want you to understand this. The portrait is still in the corridor. It will stay there. She has a word for both of us, and she does not distinguish, and I think she is right not to. A child does not have to choose. A child can have room for everyone she loves. She wrote about Cain. She wrote, he is honest in a way that took me time to adjust to, because I grew up in a court where honesty was something people did strategically. He is honest the way some people are tall. It is simply what he is, and he has never thought to be otherwise. He stayed in the library because he did not want to leave. He writes good letters. He tends his pine trees. He read the rabbit book to Sera for 6 months before I arrived, and he has opinions about the rabbit's decision-making. She wrote, I chose this, Papa, not because a treaty required it, because a 2-year-old walked across a room and put her arms up, and I understood immediately and have not recovered. She wrote, I hope you will come and see it. I think you will like them both. She sealed the letter. She put it with Cain's. He was reading through his when she came in. He looked up. She put her letter beside his. He looked at it. He said, "Are you certain?" She said, "Yes." He said, "Your father," she said, "will understand." She paused. "He sent me here to save the kingdom, and I did. This is what saving it looks like from the inside." He said nothing. She said, "He will come. I know him. He will want to meet her." Ken said, "He will find she has a lot of opinions." Lena said, "He will survive it. He raised me." The corner of Ken's mouth did the thing it did now, the small, warm thing that was not quite a smile and was better than one. He said, "Fair." He sealed his letter. He set it beside hers. They sat in the study in the quiet fortress, and outside the window, the courtyard was full of snow, and Sera was asleep upstairs with her blanket and her rabbit book and the stone from the courtyard. "That was a very good shape," he said, "Luna." She looked at him. He said, "That is the word for what I am asking you to be. Not a hostage and not a guest and not a treaty term. Luna." She said, "I know what it means." He said, "I know you know. I want to say it plainly." She said, "Plainly then." He said, "Will you be my Luna?" She said, "Yes." He said, "That was easy." She said, "I have been here 3 months. I am somewhat overdue." He said, "Fair." She looked at the sealed letters. She said, "Do you know what she will say tomorrow when she wakes up?" He said, "Mine." She said, "Mine." She looked at him. "And she will be right." He reached across the desk. He took her hand. He held it. Outside, the snow fell, and the pine trees held it. And somewhere in the east corridor, the portrait looked out at a fortress that was warm in a way it had not been warm in 18 months. Not the same warmth. New warmth. A child's certain warmth, and a healer's honest warmth, and a man's careful warmth, and all of it together. A room being different. The way rooms were different when the right person was in them. More than one right person. More than one room could hold. Epilogue. What Mira's daughter knew. 6 months later. The fortress had changed in the way fortresses changed when people decided to live in them rather than endure them. Lena's father had come in the spring. He had sat in the courtyard with Sera for 40 minutes while Lena watched from the window. He had let Sera show him every stone in her collection and had offered opinions on each one, which Sera had accepted with the gravity of someone receiving a legitimate assessment. He had been given the rabbit book to read and had read it with the attention it deserved and had, she was told later, also developed opinions about the rabbit. He had found Cain in the study afterward. The conversation had lasted an hour. No one knew what was said. Cain did not tell her, and her father did not tell her, and she did not ask, because some things were better understood than explained. Her father had stayed 3 days. When he left, he had hugged Lena for a long time and said nothing, and she had understood that this was not absence of feeling, but the presence of too much of it. She was Luna of the Ashford territory. She had not planned this. She had planned to be civil and correct and unreachable. She had a daughter who required the rabbit book read with commentary. She had a husband who tended pine trees and stayed in libraries and said mine in the quiet of the study when he thought she was reading and not listening. She was listening. She was always listening. One morning, she found Sera in the east corridor. Sera was standing in front of the portrait. She did this sometimes. Still. Came to the corridor and stood and looked. She had more words now, at 2.5. She understood things slightly differently than she had. She looked at the portrait for a long time. Then she looked at Lena. She said, in her new, fuller vocabulary, "Mama there." She pointed at the portrait. Then she pointed at Lena. She said, "Mama here." She looked between them. She said, "Both." Lena crouched down. She said, "Yes, both." Sera considered this. She said, "Both mine." Lena said, "Yes, both yours." Sera nodded. This was satisfactory. This was, apparently, what she had been trying to say for 6 months with limited vocabulary, and what she had finally said now that the words had arrived. "Both mine." She took Lena's hand. She walked back down the corridor. At the corridor's end, Cain was standing. He had heard. He looked at Lena. She looked at him. She said, "She has always known." He said, "Yes," she said. "She knew before either of us did." He said, "She has her mother's instincts." Lena looked at the corridor, at the portrait and the woman who had loved this man and this child and had understood rooms in a way that left something in them, even after she was gone. She said, "She does." He said, "And her father's stubbornness." Lena said, "Also yes." He reached for her hand. She gave it to him. Sera was already at the far end of the corridor, heading toward the kitchen with the purposeful stride of someone who had dealt with the large questions and was now ready for breakfast. They followed her. They always did. She always knew where she was going. That is the end of "The Enemy's Daughter Called Me Mother Before He Called Me Luna." If Sera pointing at the portrait and then at Lena and saying "both mine" broke you open, you are exactly the person I make these stories for. My name is Sansa. I will see you for the next one.